and welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today I'm going to continue from where I left off and talk more about the menopause, because women have it. Most people go through it to some degree, some to a very serious degree, some maybe not so bad, but most people have it. And you have to agree that if you suddenly cannot have children anymore and your life is based upon having children, or your family is just grown up and you feel like you're at your wit's end, you have an empty nest syndrome. That's not a problem for some women, but it is for others. And your estrogen, you're losing it, so you're having menopause symptoms. You can feel like kind of just disheveled in a way. What happens next? How do I take care of myself next? What do I do next? My life is changing. I don't have my cycle anymore. I don't have relationships like I used to have. My children are all grown up. But physically, I am changing. I don't look quite the same. I'm older. My hair is now grown white, and I'm just not the same person as I used to be. And these symptoms are just awful. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm dizzy, I can't go out in a crowd, I want to scream, and I can't sleep. I'm sleepless. What do I do now? It's like the body has just taken a vacation and it's doing something completely different than what you would expect. And these are the feelings and the symptoms that you get during menopause. And remember, men have it too. I know a guy who used to have hormone shots regularly because his change was rapid enough that he had symptoms that needed to be treated, just like a female. So many women just put up with it and they just go through life, but they're very, very uncomfortable depending upon the intensity of the symptoms that they are experiencing. And I'm one for getting help. If you need help, get help. Don't put up with symptoms without help. Just going through it like a trooper doesn't make you feel any better. You don't have to be a hero. If you're having trouble, get help. There are different herbs and medicines, non-estrogenic medicines that can help you. Doctors can prescribe them for you. So if you're having a really bad menopause and you know you don't want to take estrogen because of the cancer risk, although I'm not 100% sure of the cancer risk, but this is what everyone is saying, so I'm assuming they know what they're talking about. There are other medications that you can take. There are herbs that you can take. There are some plants that have natural plant estrogens within them that you can eat, so you're kind of eating and getting some estrogen that way in a very natural way through your food. There are ways to help, and you need to search those out. If you decide that you want to go and take herbs to help out, or even essential oils, which have become quite popular these days, go to somebody who knows what they're doing, because herbs are very potent. They are like medicine. A lot of women take St. John's wort, and it helps them a lot with their hot flashes and other symptoms, because there has to be natural estrogen in it for that to happen, or some kind of an herb. So you need to go to somebody who knows what they're doing. Go to a health food store or someplace where you can see somebody that's experienced in dealing with herbs if you want to do it naturally without taking medications. But there are also medications that can help that do not have estrogen in them, and they are helpful to you as well, can be helpful to you as well. Don't be a hero. Get help if you need it. That's my take on it. Okay, let's go on into the charts. I'm going to be talking now about personality and mood, and then I'm going to go into the menopause itself. Now, in terms of personality and mood, a lot of our personality is based upon our hormones and upon neurotransmitters. Now, I've talked to you before about neurotransmitters, and I'm going to define them, but we've talked about the neurotransmitters being in the brain and in the spinal column and what they do to get nervous impulses. And we've also talked about different illnesses like myasthenia gravis and Parkinson's and other kinds of illnesses where the neurotransmitters are involved, and how some depressions are caused because there's a lack of dopamine in the system. Dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters. We've talked about that, but I want to go back to it because there is an interplay between hormones that the human being produces and the neurotransmitters. They kind of work together. When one is off, the other is going to be off too. too. So I really want to get into that. I noticed when I was talking about the neurotransmitters, when we were doing things in terms of brain physiology, when I was talking about it, when I had that segment on it, I noticed that a lot of the symptoms mimic the symptoms that you would get from hormonal changes. How would you know whether your symptoms are caused by hormonal changes or whether you have a problem with the balance of the neurotransmitters? And you know, a lot of mental illnesses are caused because the biochemistry of the brain is not balanced. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So you have too much of one and not enough of the other of the neurotransmitters. So we have an awful lot going on in our systems. Our systems are very complicated, and we have an awful lot going on in them. And one thing being off will affect another thing that will be off, and there's an interplay there. So I do want to get to the neurotransmitters and the hormones together. So let's get back to this. What are the neurotransmitters? And what are the hormones? Let's start off with the hormones. The hormones are substances. If you were a chemist, you would call them compounds. I'm just going to call them substances here. A compound is a combination of 2 or 3 different substances. But they're substances such as insulin in your system. Insulin is a hormone. Thyroxine that comes from the thyroid gland is a hormone, and they're formed in the glands, and then they get into the bloodstream and they affect the way that the body works. You do have hormones that are called ductless, and you have hormones that just go, they go right into the bloodstream, and others go through a little duct before it gets to the bloodstream. So there is a division there, but we're not going to get into that. They affect the way the body works. Neurotransmitters are also chemical substances. We've talked before about epinephrine and dopamine, and they transmit nerve impulses to muscles and nerves. And if you look at the word neurotransmitter, neuro means nerve, transmitter means something is being moved around the body. They're being transmitted together. So you have those 2 substances, they interplay with each other. Men have testosterone as a hormone. The male hormones as a group are called androgens. However, the main hormone that we're looking at is going to be testosterone. Women have estrogen and progesterone as hormones. It's the lack of the estrogen that causes the symptoms of menopause. Progesterone and estrogen work together. I know of women who took birth control pills, and for 2 weeks they took progesterone and estrogen together. Then at the end of a 2-week period, they dropped the estrogen and took only the progesterone. So it was kind of split in half. This was devised by doctors who were, managing them. And every woman I talked to that didn't have the estrogen but went to the progesterone as part of her treatment, as part of the pills, they were all severely depressed until they got back on the estrogen again. So many of them either wouldn't take the progesterone or just continued with the estrogen and didn't stop it, as the doctor suggested. What they were trying to do, what the doctors were trying to do, was to mimic a normal cycle where you have so many hormones and they rise and they fall, and other hormones come up and they rise and fall, and they interplay together. But they were trying to arrange it so a woman would have a normal cycle, or it would mimic a normal cycle. But the problem was, when the estrogen dropped off, they had the progesterone that they were going to take, and they were very, very depressed with it. So when they say that menopause does not cause depression, there are hormonal changes in which it does cause depression. So I just don't agree with everything that's written. You kind of have to use your judgment. So women have the estrogen and the progesterone. These hormones are reproductive hormones, and they give us what's called the secondary sexual characteristics. So what are they? Well, in men, it causes men to have deeper voices, a greater physical strength than women. They have larger bones, a larger physique, and they have beards and more hair. And when in women, You have higher pitched voices, smaller bodies, no beards, less strength. So the women's characteristics, they're called secondary sexual characteristics, but the characteristics are ordained, if I can use that word, by the hormones in her system. The same with men, either testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. And you've got to remember that women start getting into their cycles when they are in their early teens, usually about 13 years old, and they will have one egg ripen a month for the rest of their reproductive years. Men start sperm production also in the teenage years, and that continues more or less forever. Their bodies are always making sperm. With the women, they are producing one egg a month, sometimes more, but usually, I'm talking rule of thumb here, usually one egg per month until they get into the menopause. There's a big difference there. And when menopause comes, the men lose the hormones gradually, women lose their hormones more rapidly and more dramatically, which means that they have more difficult symptoms to go through. These hormones affect personality. Women get more symptoms than men do, and they feel like their personality is changing. They can tell that their personality is changing. Now, I want to say here that you don't lose your personality characteristics. Whatever type of personality you are, whatever characteristics you have as a personality, that's going to remain with you. And I am basically the same person as I used to be when I was 25. You know, your body changes, you have different systems, but the core of you is going to be the same. But you may feel that the core of you is changing. There is something called, and I hadn't intended to talk about this, but I'm going to mention it since it's on my mind. It's called the sense of the permanent self. That's not exactly what it's called, but in other words, the self which is permanent, the core of you. If you think about your life, let's say you're in your 30s, you don't feel like you've changed in terms of your personality since you were a child. You feel like the same person as you're going through your life. If you were to live to be 102, you'd feel the same way. There's a core of you that stays, and you feel like you're the same person. Now, you know your body's changed. You're not young anymore. You have problems that you didn't have before. So there is that change, but there is a core of you that seems to be the same no matter how old you are, and it's called the permanent self. And it's the same because you have a core that exists that doesn't change, but you may feel that you are changing in terms of the way your life is, in terms of the way you handle problems, in terms of the way you feel, because there are so many changes in your body that you're experiencing, but at the same time, the core of you remains the same. I just wanted to bring that out. Okay, women feel their personality is changing. They don't quite feel like themselves. They're aware that the core is there, you know, but they don't feel like themselves. And it's the drop of estrogen that gives the symptoms in women. It can be stopped by taking estrogen, but the symptoms are not caused by progesterone, and the symptoms are not caused by the lack of a uterus. The symptoms are caused by the lack of estrogen. Estrogen seems to be the key in terms of having symptoms or not having symptoms. There are herbs that can help. There are some foods and plants that have natural estrogen in them, and there are non-estrogen medications that can also help. I mentioned that before. Now, in midlife crisis, you have mood swings. So we're going to the midlife crisis now more than the menopause. I'm trying to tie the two of them in together because they occur at about the same time. There are mood swings approaching the menopause, and the moods can change a lot as menopause improves, as menopause approaches. You may have 1 minute where you feel fine, and the next minute when you're really angry about something. There was an article I read about a woman who felt fine. She was watching a movie and with her husband, and she was fine, and then she was screaming at him because he forgot to put the cap back on the toothpaste when he brushed his teeth. Now, does that seem odd? It seems like overbearing and odd, but that's the way the cycles occur. When you are not stable in your emotional life because of a drop in estrogen, then you have these varying symptoms and you have mood swings. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a mental illness. You know, you're not bipolar, or as they used to say, manic depressive. It's due to the change in the hormones. The hormones are critical in terms of your personality, in terms of how you feel. So mood swings are common in midlife, and sometimes they get started in perimenopause. Now, perimenopause is a period of time before you hit the menopause when there is a change in your emotions due to a change in your hormones. The hormones are changing, and you can sense it because you don't feel the same, but it's not exactly menopause. It's like a kind of a transitory period of time. So 11 to 21% of people have perimenopause, and 8 to 38% have symptoms after the menopause. In other words, we're talking about the symptoms here. During perimenopause, you will have 11 to 21% of people going through some kind of hormonal change in which they'll have symptoms. But when the menopause hits, or after the menopause, you have 8 to 38% of people having the symptoms. Now, perimenopause is a stage leading up to menopause. After menopause, and that's the term for it, after menopause is a stage that occurs 1 year after the cycle stops. When the cycle stops, technically, you're kind of in menopause, but more thoroughly in it if you have not had a cycle in a year's time. That's how it's defined medically. I define it a little different just because of personal experience, but that's the way medical people explain it. There are 4 reasons for mood swings. 1, the hormone changes, the estrogen and the progesterone, and the way that they interplay together. These are the 2 female hormones that interplay with each other, plus they interact with the neurotransmitters, especially serotonin and GABA. The serotonin and GABA are active in depression, PMS, and anxiety disorders. You have an interplay there, and those are also symptoms that you get when you're in menopause. Then a second reason for mood swings is sleeplessness. 61% of menopausal women have insomnia. I hear about it all the time. You know, people say, I can't sleep. What's the matter with me? I can't sleep. And they think there's something terribly wrong with you. There are things you can drink like tea. Chamomile tea is good for putting people to sleep. I had a missionary friend of mine who used to visit me every so often. She went all over the world, and every so often she'd come in and we'd spend a few days together, and we'd sit up and talk all night. Well, we learned early on the one thing we could not do was drink chamomile tea. She loved chamomile tea. I'm not crazy about the taste, but it's not bad. And if we had it, we would just start relaxing with it to the point where we were half dozing in our conversations. So as we continued our friendship, we're still friends to this day, of course, what we do is we make sure that we don't have chamomile tea on hand and drink something else instead, and then you can stay awake. I'm one of these people that have no problems with caffeine. I could drink a bottle of caffeine. I would have no effect at all. It doesn't wire me up. It doesn't cause me to be, active. It doesn't cause me to be jittery. It's like I had a glass of water. But some people are very, very prone to having problems with caffeine. Now, hot flashes. A lot of women have hot flashes, and it's due to estrogen loss, and it can give sleeplessness as well. So that's another reason why people have a problem in sleeping, is because of the hot flashes. When they hit you, you feel like you're burning up. There's nothing fun about a hot flash. If you were to explain it to somebody, you would say, well, I feel hot. Or if you were to read about it in a book, you would say, oh yeah, I feel hot. And, people feel hot. You don't think much about it, but when you're having a hot flash, it feels like you're literally burning in the inside, and you just can't stop it, and you're sweating and you feel terrible. That's a hot flash, and they pass on. You get it and then they abate, you get it and they abate. But some people say that they have hot flashes that last for an hour or so at a time. I can't imagine it, but some women do experience them that way. So that's another problem with mood changes. Facing age can cause anxiety. Taking care of sick relatives and elderly parents can cause anxiety. If you are having anxiety because of either taking care of sick or elderly parents, or you are facing age and you are anxious about getting older, you're afraid of getting older, you're afraid of being disabled, you're afraid you're not going to have a normal life anymore, especially if you have a health problem. And then that too can cause changes in your mood. So you have these things that are both emotional and physical that are causing changes in your mood. Now what I'm going to do is close it here, because I want to get into what the monthly cycle is, what happens physiologically, how the menopause occurs, what can be done to help. But I want to have an introduction to all of this so you'll have a better idea of what it's like. And I know I'm getting rather deep into it, but if you're suffering from it, or if you think you're going to be suffering from it, I think it's a help to know what you're going through and to understand why. If you understand why you're going through what you're going through, it makes it easier to take. And if you understand also that there's help with it, go to a doctor, go to a herbalist, but you don't have to go through it alone. So I'm going to continue with this next time. We are not finished. We probably only need one more segment of it. So we'll do it next time. Please join me then.